30,000 feet above the Strait of Hormuz, inside the cockpit of an F-35 Lightning II, the warning tone changed. Not the soft background hum pilots hear during routine patrol. This was sharper, cleaner, the kind of sound that cuts through everything else and says one thing: someone just locked onto you. The pilot did not panic. His left hand stayed steady on the throttle. His right hand stayed calm on the stick. But inside his helmet display, a red threat symbol pulsed at the edge of the tactical picture. Iranian 14 Tomcat, bearing west, altitude high, and closing fast. What happened next over one of the most watched waterways on Earth reveals everything about modern air combat, because the Iranians thought they were challenging one stealth fighter. They were wrong. They had just touched the outer wire of an entire carrier strike group, and the US Navy was about to teach them the difference between making noise and controlling the sky. This story goes deeper than a simple intercept. It exposes how 5th generation warfare really works when legends meet reality at 30,000 feet. The time was 5:41 a.m. local when the radar lock first appeared on the F-35 sensors. Below the American pilot, the Strait of Hormuz stretched like a dark blue channel packed with tanker lanes and invisible lines nobody wanted to cross by accident. Farther south, a U.S. carrier strike group moved through the morning darkness, its decks still waking under the first orange edge of sunrise. The F-35 was not alone up there. It never is. But the first decision belonged to one pilot watching that red symbol pulse on his display. The Iranian F-14 was beyond visual range, but the stealth fighter already knew enough. Radar emissions, heat signatures, bearing drift, signal strength. The jet's sensors were building a picture faster than any human eye could process. Then a second contact appeared. Slightly lower, offset to the south. 2 aircraft, both Iranian, both inbound, both pushing toward a confrontation that would test every rule of engagement written for this exact scenario. Inside the carrier's combat information center, the same contacts appeared on a wall of glowing displays. The room did not explode into chaos. It tightened. Sailors leaned closer to consoles. Watch officers adjusted headsets. A tactical action officer marked the tracks and waited for confirmation. The captain standing behind the watch team said nothing at first. He watched the lines converge on the screen and understood exactly what was happening. This was not an accident. This was a test. At 5:42, the first radio call went out across open frequency. Iranian military aircraft. This is United States naval aircraft operating in international airspace. Maintain safe distance and identify your intentions. The response was silence. The Iranian jets kept coming, but their behavior told a different story. The lead Tomcat climbed slightly, holding its nose high to improve radar reach. The second Tomcat dropped lower, sliding into a wider track. One high, one low, one watching, one pressing. A classic intimidation pattern dressed up as routine patrol behavior. Remember this detail because it becomes crucial later. The F-14 Tomcat is a relic by modern standards, born in the Cold War era and built for long-range interception. But relics can still be dangerous when they carry missiles, radar, and pilots willing to push boundaries. These particular Tomcats were not freelancing. Someone on the ground was coordinating this intercept, feeding them confidence, and testing how the Americans would respond to pressure over Hormuz. But the US Navy had seen this playbook before. At 5:43, when the F-35 pilot transmitted 6 words that changed everything, Tomcat has gone active. Those words shifted the carrier's combat information center from passive observation to controlled response. The E-2D Hawkeye orbiting farther east was brought fully into the track. Aegis destroyers in the formation began recording radar behavior. Electronic warfare teams opened collection windows. Nobody fired, nobody threatened. The Americans were not guessing anymore, they were documenting. Here's where the story takes a turn. The Iranians never saw coming. Every pulse from that Tomcat's radar was being captured. Every change in frequency, every scan pattern, every attempt to hold a target lock was feeding into one of the most advanced sensor networks ever built. The Iranian pilots thought they were applying pressure. In reality, they were broadcasting their own fingerprints to a system designed to learn from exactly this kind of encounter. At 5:45, the F-35 made its first tactical move. The pilot dipped slightly, adjusting to a cleaner stealth angle. What happened next would have looked like magic to the Iranian radar operator. The American contact did not vanish completely. That would be too dramatic, too Hollywood. Instead, it became uncertain, a smear on the scope, a target that refused to stay where the radar expected it to be. The F-14 continued forward, but the fight had already changed shape. The lead Tomcat accelerated, increasing closure rate and changing the mood in both cockpits. Inside the F-35, the Iranian aircraft was still beyond visual range, still just a symbol on the helmet display, but the geometry had become sharper, more intentional. Below them, the Strait of Hormuz was waking into daylight. Tankers crawled through shipping lanes. Patrol boats carved white scars across the surface. Somewhere beneath that water, submarines listened. Somewhere above it, satellites watched. But the center of this fight was one silent cockpit, one blinking threat symbol, and two old Iranian fighters trying to force a fifth-generation jet to reveal itself. And this is where it gets personal. The Tomcats were loud in the electromagnetic spectrum. They had to be. Their radar technology required power and persistence to cut through modern electronic countermeasures. The F-35 was the opposite. It listened first, saw first, and shot only if forced. That fundamental difference was about to decide the outcome before either side fired a single missile. At 5:48, the lead Iranian 15 increased radar output again. The signal came in stronger, pulsing across the F-35's passive sensors. But every increase in power made things worse for the Iranians. The stealth fighters' computers were classifying each emission, comparing it to known signatures, measuring signal strength and timing patterns in real time. The pilot did not need to touch anything. His aircraft was doing what it was designed to do automatically: learn the enemy while staying invisible. On the carrier, that same information fed into the Combat Information Center, where analysts were building a complete picture of Iranian radar behavior under pressure. They were watching the F-14's search patterns, lock attempts, and coordination with ground control sites along the Iranian coast. This was no longer just an intercept. It was a masterclass in electronic intelligence gathering, with the Iranians providing live training data to their primary adversary. The second hail went out, firmer this time. Iranian aircraft, you are maneuvering unsafely near United States naval aircraft. Alter course immediately. Again, no response. By 5:52, the two Tomcats had crossed inside 50 nautical miles. In modern air combat, that distance is not comfortable space. It is a countdown. Missiles travel faster than explanations. Radar locks become launches in seconds. And over Hormuz, seconds carry the weight of regional policy, pilot survival, and historical consequences compressed into one cockpit decision. But here's what the Iranian pilots could not see. While they were focused on that single F-35, the entire carrier strike group was waking up around them. Alert crews moved across the flight deck with purpose. Two F/A-18E Super Hornets were being prepared for launch. Ordnance crews cleared weapons rails. Steam curled low across the catapults like the ship itself was breathing in preparation for what might come next. The F-35 pilot did not light up his own radar. He did not give the Tomcats what they wanted. Instead, he adjusted course by only a few degrees. Subtle enough to avoid escalation, precise enough to reshape the intercept geometry. And that small move created a problem the Iranian formation could not solve. Their lead aircraft tried to maintain the radar lock, burning more electronic energy into the sky, transmitting longer and stronger to hold an uncertain target. Every second of that transmission was being recorded by the most sophisticated electronic warfare systems on Earth. At 5:53, something shifted. The F-35 slid laterally, changing the intercept mathematics without breaking formation discipline. The Tomcat's radar lock flickered, faded, then strengthened again as the Iranian pilot corrected his search pattern. But those corrections revealed timing, revealed decision-making under pressure, revealed exactly how Iran's aging interceptors reacted when their primary sensor could not deliver reliable tracking data. The Americans had taken control of the geometry. The Iranians had the noise and the apparent aggression. But in modern air combat, the side that controls geometry controls the outcome. The F-35 was no longer just surviving the encounter. It was dictating terms while appearing to do nothing at all. Now here's the part that should make you understand the true sophistication of what was happening. At 5:54, a coastal radar installation in Iran pulsed once across the water. Short duration, high power, then gone. That was not random, that was coordination. Someone on the ground was trying to help the Tomcats make sense of what their airborne radar could not solve alone. Ground control was feeding information to the interceptors, trying to create a clearer tactical picture of the American stealth fighters' position and intentions. The US Navy logged that emission too. Frequency, timing, signal strength, transmission pattern. They were not just fighting two aircraft anymore. They were mapping the entire Iranian air defense network's response to a stealth incursion. Every attempt to help the Tomcats was actually helping the Americans understand how Iran coordinated air defense operations in real time. The lower F-14 made its move at 5:56, turning inward to create a bracket that would place the F-35 between both Iranian aircraft. It was professionally executed, probably ordered from ground control, designed to make the American pilot choose between accepting pressure or turning away and appearing to retreat, but the choice was an illusion. The F-35 answered by descending 500 feet and rolling gently left. That single maneuver forced both Tomcats to adjust their flight paths simultaneously. Two separate aircraft now reacting to one invisible decision. That was the moment when initiative shifted completely. The Iranians were no longer shaping the fight. They were responding to moves they could barely track, made by an aircraft they could not reliably target, supported by a network they could not see or understand. The F-35 pilot keyed his mic with 4 words that summarized everything. "I have control of geometry." At 5:57, the carrier answered with the next layer of response. 2 Super Hornets were ordered to man aircraft and prepare for launch. Their pilots climbed into cockpits, while crew chiefs pulled safety pins and ran final checks. The aircraft were not launching yet, but they were no longer just background metal on the deck. They were the next sentence in a conversation the Iranians could only hear pieces of. The lead Tomcat tried one more time to strengthen its radar lock. For a brief moment, it burned brighter on the F-35 sensors like a flashlight aimed into fog, and that desperation pulse gave the Navy exactly what it needed: a clean, strong emission that could be classified down to individual waveform characteristics. The Iranian pilot thought he was increasing pressure. Instead, he had just handed American intelligence another detailed signature of his aircraft's radar operating under combat stress. By 6 o'clock, the sky over Hormuz had changed completely. The Iranian Tomcats were still inbound, still loud, still visible on every scope, but initiative had shifted to the Americans. The F-14s had come to challenge the F-35, and now they were feeding it intelligence while a carrier strike group prepared multiple response layers they could not see coming. The lead Tomcat made the mistake every older fighter makes against 5th-generation aircraft. It tried to see with radar what was already seeing it from every direction. The Iranian F-14 held altitude, nose pointed east, radar still active, still searching for a clean hold on the American stealth fighter. But every pulse was being captured, every scan pattern recorded, every frequency change logged by systems the Tomcat's designers never imagined. The F-35 shifted again at 6:01, a shallow bank and slight altitude change that repositioned the aircraft to the north. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would look aggressive from the outside, but the effect was immediate. The Tomcat's target track broke for the second time. In the Iranian cockpit, the F-35 would not have looked like a clean enemy contact anymore. It would have looked like a problem, a ghost with intent that appeared and disappeared according to its own schedule. The second Tomcat reacted by widening its turn, trying to preserve the original bracket formation. But that adjustment told the American network everything it needed to know. The Iranian formation was losing coherence. Aircraft were compensating for what their sensors could not deliver. Formation discipline was breaking under the pressure of fighting an enemy that refused to behave like a normal target. Another coastal radar pulse came from Iran at 6:02, stronger and shorter than before. Electronic warfare teams on the destroyer screen marked it instantly. Ground support was not giving up. Someone ashore was still trying to make sense of what the aircraft in the sky could not solve alone. But every attempt to help was actually expanding the intelligence picture for American collection systems. The carrier's response came at 6:03. The catapult officer dropped to one knee, pointed forward, and launched the first Super Hornet into the sunrise. Steam exploded across the deck as the fighter vanished off the bow, afterburners burning orange against the pale horizon. Seconds later, the second Super Hornet followed, climbing hard into the eastern sky with a full air-to-air weapons load. The message was not subtle. The F-35 was still in control of the immediate airspace, but now it was no longer alone in a way the Iranians could ignore. Inside the lead Tomcat, warning receivers would have begun showing a busier electromagnetic picture. More contacts, more emissions, more American systems waking up around them. Not one source, but multiple sources. A carrier air wing, an E-2D Hawkeye, Aegis destroyers, and a stealth fighter already positioned exactly where it wanted to be. The Iranian pilots had challenged one aircraft. They had awakened an entire carrier strike group, and that carrier group was demonstrating something more dangerous than weapons. It was demonstrating control. Perfect, disciplined escalation management that could go from defensive patrol to overwhelming force in minutes but did not need to. At 6:05, the F-35 gave the Tomcats one final warning. Iranian aircraft, you are approaching a defensive air patrol protecting United States naval forces in international airspace. Alter course now. For the first time, the silence that followed did not feel aggressive, it felt heavy. The lead Tomcat held course for a few more seconds, long enough to prove it had not been scared away, long enough to satisfy whoever was listening from ground control, but not long enough to change an outcome that had already been decided by geometry, sensors, and the cold mathematics of modern air combat. Then the Tomcat's nose shifted. Only a few degrees, but in aerial warfare, a few degrees can say more than any radio transmission. The lead F-14 began turning northeast, away from the intercept line. The lower Tomcat hesitated, and that hesitation was logged too. One aircraft turning, one aircraft holding, formation discipline breaking under pressure that never required a single American weapon to leave its rail. The US Navy was not trying to humiliate them. It was not trying to force a shoot-down or create a spectacular incident for news cameras. It was doing exactly what it had trained to do for decades. Defend the carrier, control escalation, and make the other side decide whether pride was worth dying for. At 6 and 7, the second Tomcat finally followed. Its turn wider and slower than the lead aircraft. Less clean, less confident, giving away the story of what had really happened up there. The Iranians had pressed hard with radar locks, formation tactics, and the reputation of a legendary interceptor, but they had found no opening, no clean targeting solution, no American retreat, no panic inside the carrier group. Only a wall of sensors, aircraft, discipline, and silence that absorbed their pressure and turned it into intelligence. Because here's what this all means going forward. The encounter was not really about two F-14s challenging one F-35 over Hormuz. It was about how modern naval aviation turns confrontation into information. Every second the Iranians spent trying to pressure that stealth fighter cost them something valuable. Radar signatures, response timing, ground control coordination patterns, formation behavior under stress, and communication procedures. None of that looks dramatic from the outside. No missiles fired, no explosions, no wreckage scattered across the water, but to intelligence analysts, it was worth more than a victory. It was a complete profile of how Iran's air defense system responds when challenged by stealth technology integrated into a carrier strike group's layered defensive network. The F-14 Tomcat is still a formidable aircraft in the right hands. Fast, powerful, built when long-range radar and heavy missiles could dominate aerial combat before enemies ever saw each other. The US Navy knows that better than anyone, because it once flew the Tomcat from its own carrier decks. But legends do not stop the advance of technology, and over Hormuz that morning, the Tomcat encountered something it was never designed to fight. Not just a stealth aircraft, but a living network of ships, sensors, airborne controllers, electronic warfare systems, and carrier-based fighters. The Iranian pilots brought pressure and old-school confidence. The Americans brought the complete picture, and in modern air combat, the side with the picture usually writes the ending before the first shot is ever fired. The most important victory is sometimes the one that leaves no debris field behind, no international incident, no breaking news banner. Just professional air crews doing their jobs with discipline that turns potential disasters into controlled outcomes. So here's the question that matters. When aging legends meet cutting-edge technology over the world's most dangerous waterways, does raw power matter more than perfect information? The answer was written in the sky above Hormuz that morning, where silence defeated noise and control defeated aggression without firing a single shot.